Almost. All right. Welcome everyone to episode 5, the last and final of our Down to Earth series celebrating California's commitment to sustainability in the wineries. It has been such a fun journey learning all about sustainability with you, Aida, and I'm sad that it's over, but I also know that this is an ongoing journey.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey for sure. And I just am really excited about today because we're not just talking about California wine and sustainability, but we're talking about the whole Golden State, which, as Amanda and I living here, we love all things sustainable in the Golden State. So let's talk about it today.
Yeah. I mean, we've covered so much over the past 4 weeks. I mean, we've covered the fundamentals of sustainability. So the 3 E's, if you want to do them one more time in case anyone missed
One
it.
more time. Yeah, just one more time so that we all we're going to like be dreaming of the 3 E's of
Yes.
sustainability, which are being environmentally friendly, taking into account the economics so that it, is realistic and can be sustained in the long term. And then of course, having some kind of social equitable measures. So in the sense of taking care of your community, taking care of your employees, and just doing the right thing at the end of the day.
Yep. Um, well said, and I think you've nailed it. Not that you hadn't before, but I think you really nailed it this week. So we've covered the 3 E's, the fundamentals. We also dove into organic and biodynamic, how that weaves into sustainability, and they really do work together in more of a Venn diagram than any sort of can't get that hierarchical pyramid. We talked about animals in the vineyard, and of course, we gave you some tools on how to spot these wines in the wild. So whether you are
Yes.
searching online or whether you're peeking at the back of a label, words to look for, certifications to look for. But one thing that we haven't covered as of yet is why this is all possible, how we are able to do all of these things. And so much of California's ability to be sustainable in the wineries and their commitment to it in the vineyards is because of California as a state, as well as the supporting agricultural endeavors that are happening in the state of California. So we are not operating in a silo here. This is truly a group effort, and we have a lot to be thankful for in the way of California, as well as our brothers and sisters in other agricultural areas.
Yeah, it's true. And even when Amanda and I were discussing this week's topic, we were even saying, even when you just travel around the state, like if you love a good California road trip the way we do, it's just a matter of time before you're going to come across signs of, farms that you pass that are certified sustainable or organic, that you pass farmers market and you see a real commitment of the local community going and buying local. And even, especially in Silicon Valley these days, EV charging stations and people trying to make every single piece of their life sustainable. So it's only makes sense that in a state where we have this mentality really truly in our everyday actions, that it goes not just in the wine in our glass, but through all of the agriculture that we have here in the state, which, I keep saying, but I am truly proud of being born and raised here in California, that we are one of the world leaders in sustainability. And because we are the number one producer of agriculture in the nation. I mean, that means a lot, right? When you're
Hmm.
producing just so much, and we'll get into the exact amount, but so much of the nation's agriculture, fruits and nuts, it really means that we have a commitment at the end of the day to push this conversation forward. And so, like Amanda was saying, we're not operating in a silo, but instead, really the winemakers get to reach out to their neighbors who may not be wine growers and say, we're actually going toward the same goal. And so, like I've said every week, rising tide, all ships, right? That's what's happening here.
Yes, absolutely. And just like harvesting grapes or whatever you're doing on the agricultural side, farming is a skilled labor, and the farmers and the state take are incredibly respectful and grateful to have the skilled labor force that we have. And to that end, there are so many things that the state has done to ensure their safety, to make sure that they're well
Yeah.
taken care of. In fact, the second highest minimum wage in the nation, one of only 2 states with heat protection standards for their workers, and then some of the most transparent inputs reporting system in the world, including protections for farmers and field workers, which is really amazing. So the state, as well as the farming and agricultural community, really take what these people are doing in the vineyards and on the farms incredibly seriously, and have put real mandates in place to make sure that they are well taken care of.
Yeah, and I think, that's that part that we just kind of want to remind you that one of those E's is that, that equitable part and that social responsibility. And that right there shows you that it's not just about throwing like a fundraiser once a year. It's really about the day in, day out operations during harvest, every single step really through the wine growing process, and through the agriculture process. So yeah, that's something I think that we've talked about a little bit, but it's really important to think of, especially right now, we're talking a lot about farm workers' rights, and it is really important that you realize that the wines you're buying are not just being produced, so environmentally friendly, but also with that in mind, which is just, something else that we can be happy about.
Yeah,
And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was going to say it's a big part. And, I think, that I've been talking to a lot of the vineyards, just trying to deep dive a little bit more into what they're doing on the sustainable front. And I don't know why, but like, when I thought of sustainability initially, that was not one of the pillars
Yeah.
that was at the forefront of my mind. But it was always a huge part of the conversation, if not the most important part of the conversation, when I was talking to a lot of the wineries and vineyard owners about what they're doing in terms of sustainability and taking care of their workers was definitely, I mean, not that we don't take everything, with equally, but that was definitely a point of focus and an area that they were really excited to discuss.
hmm Yeah. And like we said last week, you can go to either CaliforniaSustainableWine.com or you can go to the individual wineries' websites in order to learn about these practices. I think what's so great about where we are in this social media world, the information age, is that a lot of these wineries are being as transparent as they can be, and they want you to come and taste and visit and ask these questions, because like we said when we were talking about how you identify sustainable wines, if you're asking these questions, they're going to want to share this information. They're going to want to make sure it's on the label, it's on the website, it's out there for you. And in fact, we even have one of our wines today that did a whole label redesign to make it even easier for you to understand what they are doing in these efforts. But before we go any further, we should just give you just a little bit of like, okay, you already know how sustainable California wine is, right? I wish we could do like a little pop quiz for you all, but just in case you don't
They can
remember,
do it on the Discover California Wines website if they want.
but just in case you don't remember, it's over 80% of wines made in California are made in a sustainable fashion these days. But also, just thinking about the actual sheer amount of agriculture happening in the state. We have more than 400 different commodities, all the way from honey to even kiwis being grown in California, which I always feel like is a surprising one for a lot of us. And more than a third of the country's vegetables are coming from here, and over 2/3 of the fruit and nuts. And that's not even getting into the wine grapes. We're talking table grapes, we're talking almonds, we're talking all that other stuff. So like we were saying, if the rest of the agriculture industry is working with the wine growers, it really is helping us go forward in a way that has a lot of power. You just like really has some heft behind the actions being taken.
Yeah, and just to tease out a little, we'll actually be talking about one of the wineries that was inspired by farming of other agricultural products, and
Yes.
and why they became organic, or sustainable, I should
But
say.
we should probably address why I have cheese and you have wine right now. So
Yes, well, I have both. You just can't see it.
I know
And
you
that's
can only
probably
see my
good because
cheese
I
right now.
generally I get kind of snacky and hungry, like, a day or two before when I'm researching. But I'd actually love to cheers with you before we go any further if you've already got a little sparkling in your glass.
I do. I do.
Okay, well, cheers. It's been so much
Cheers.
fun. I'm excited that we're ending with a little sparkling and cheese. This is my favorite way to do any of these things with you. So shout out
Yes.
to California Wines for making that happen.
Yes. Thank you very much. What a high note to finish on.
Absolutely. So talk to us about dairy in California, because this is one of the agricultural industries that is operating sustainably.
Yeah, it is. So I actually need to make sure I give you all of my stats. So excuse me while I refer to all of my notes. So one of the things that, in addition to working with California wines, one of the things I love doing is also working with our friends at California Grown, which represent all those other agricultural products we were talking about. And in working with them, one of the things that I was most surprised by this last year, because I've learned a lot of different stats about Californian agriculture, is that 99% of California dairies are family owned. And these families have been working together much longer than a lot of us might realize, in terms of almost 50 years towards various sustainability efforts. And so one of them that I was unaware of until I started working with them was that it said, I just want to read this so I get the numbers right. So California dairy has reduced its carbon footprint by more than 45%, and the amount of water used per gallon of milk produced has decreased by more than 88% over a 50-year period. And that's what's already happened, but they're also working extensively going forward. And as we get more into the cheeses, I'll share a few of those stats with you. But really, it's not something that's just happening today. Just like this is the 10th anniversary of Down to Earth Month, the California dairy has also been working for decades towards the future and making responsible choices. And, that is really important because California is one of the absolute nation's leaders in dairy production, number one producer of butter and milk and even ice cream. So these are things that, I don't know about you, they're most of the dairy products I do consume. So they are coming usually right here from California. And I just want to say that we've showed you a lot of logos, but let me just show you one more, which is, now that you know all the wine logos, here's the one that you want to look out for when you're looking for California cheeses. It's the Real California Milk Seal. And that one down there at the bottom is really what's going to guarantee you that you are getting something that is made by one of our California dairy families. But that's just a quick overview. We have specific cheeses, specific wines. Amanda, should we start talking wine?
I mean, yes, I would love to. Yeah, well, I think, given that we've got some sparkling, we should begin there.
Yes.
And we are talking about, I think all of these are classics in their own right. This is a different sort of classic. So we've got the Roederer Rosé. So this is Roederer Estate. If you've heard of Roederer before, and maybe you didn't know that they made California sparkling, yes, this is the same family as the Roederer in Champagne. But years ago, they actually started an endeavor in California and started making sparkling wine. So I mean, if it's good enough for Roederer, I feel like, But I love Roederer because, they're really taking into account all of the things that we've talked about over the past few weeks. So they're farming organically with biodynamic inputs, but also they are taking extraordinary consideration for all things sustainable. So when they are looking at how their topsoil is doing, they're taking that into account. They are ensuring the protection of the Navarre River, which sort of is situated very close to the vineyards. They're looking at the inputs of their vineyards, not just from whether or not the chemicals, or I should say the inputs are synthetic or chemical, but they're also looking at whether or not the compost, what that's doing for the vineyards. So made from pomace, made from some of the animals that graze, which is local sheep manure. So they've got sheep going. They've got all the things that we love about sustainability and organic and biodynamic working together in a perfect harmonious unison, which is wonderful because not only is it a delicious wine, but we also know that it is made in a sustainable fashion, good for the environment, good for us. And I think that makes for a delicious treat with one or a few of these cheeses. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I have to say, a lot of these wines that we're having today, this one in particular is from the Anderson Valley. And a lot of these cheeses that we're having today happen to be not just from California, but mostly from Sonoma and Marin counties. That is a big focus of where we produce, one of the major areas where we produce cheese in California. So if you're traveling in California, I would say if you're in the general Fresno area, that whole area, there's a ton of great creameries, and also over in wine country. So those are both wine countries and cheese countries. So this is not just us pairing cheese and wine. When you come and visit us here in California, you can actually go and taste at Roederer and Anderson, and then go down the
Yes.
road and taste cheese as well. So this is like
Yes.
something you can replicate for yourself when you visit. But the one thing, I don't know if it's just having been, raised by a French stepmother, but for me, it's like you cannot have cheese with bubbles unless it's a triple cream. So that's kind of like how I've always been raised, is like these two must be matched in heaven.
I love
This is
it.
actually the Cowgirl Creamery Mount Tam.
Hmm.
But it's a triple cream in the sense, I love the nickname a lot of people have for this, is that it's California's brie. And not
Yes.
because it's exactly like a brie, but because it is
Because
a
it's
little bit,
better.
it's a little bit like, funky
Mm.
the way that California is. And so a
Hmm.
triple cream cheese like this, by the way, all the cheeses we're talking about today are cow's milk cheeses, but a triple cream cheese like
Mm.
this is going to give you kind of like fresh, if you've ever had fresh churned butter,
Yes.
almost like creme fraiche notes. And what I really like, you could have it younger like this, or you could turn to something like a camembert. But if you let it age a little bit, you might even get some kind of more pasture grass, or even like mushroomy notes. And
Hmm.
so that combination to me is just something that I absolutely adore. So that is the first cheese we're talking about, is pairing bubbles with a triple cream-esque cheese. The smell is delicious over here between the glass and
Yes.
the cheese.
This is such a good pairing. And this is I will say I think it has the added bonus of it being a rosé, which
Mm-hmm.
typically, especially from, I don't know, I think I maybe said Mendocino earlier, but I meant Anderson Valley. Typically from these parts has a little bit of like a funkiness to it. So, the
Yes.
Pinot Noir that's grown up here typically has like a little bit of a mushroom quality to it. So it's
Yep.
really sort of enhancing it. But the fruit on this wine is not overpowering, and it's really complementary to some of the like the funky bits that you're getting, but also texturally. I mean, you consider the amount of acidity in this wine and the amount of acidity in this cheese, and they match each other, which is great.
They do.
This is
They
also
do.
what makes sparkling wine an incredible pairing for most cheeses, because cheese has an enormous amount of acidity. It's just you don't always feel it because it's masked
Yeah.
by that delicious lactic goodness that you're feeling. So I'm happy with this probably across the board, but I think I'm especially happy with this and the Mount Tam, as your French stepmother would be as well.
Yes, very much so.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to drop in some other stats for you so you can understand the dairy side of sustainability. While we go along, let's just kind of talk a little bit of what's happening on the California dairy side. So more than 99 California dairy farms are working to replace heavy duty truck diesel with carbon negative transportation fuel. So it's just like we were talking about in the vineyards, where Amanda was saying, some of these wineries are saying, if I have to do a bunch of passes and that's going to increase my carbon footprint, is that really good in the long term? So these decisions are being made to reduce carbon footprint on the industry level and on the individual dairy creamery level as well. But that's the triple cream, which was the first one we're going to start with. Which wine
Yes.
should we move on to next, Amanda?
Yeah, we should probably go to the Fetzer, even though I hate putting down bubbly, especially one as good as Roederer. But we should probably go to the Fetzer next. I have two different wines because they are quite different, and I wanted to show just in case some of you out there are not into a Riesling that has just a touch of residual sugar, though I think you should be. We also have a Sauvignon Blanc. Just hear me out on this, okay? Um, so we're gonna go to Fetzer, which I have to say was like kind of a discovery for me, because I don't know about
Okay.
you, but I've seen Fetzer like my whole life, right? Like you go to any wine shop, almost any grocery store that carries wine, and you're likely to see Fetzer. It's a category
Yeah.
of wines that you're seeing like sub $10, usually pretty easy to pick up, easy to find. But I did not know how big a role they played in sustainability in California. And it blew my mind that every time I talked to someone, a lot of times they were bringing up Fetzer. Like when I talked to Martha Barra
Mhm.
from Barra Vineyards, she brought up the Fetzer because I was like, oh, we've got Fetzer at the end. And she was like, oh, such amazing, amazing story. Like, we're so grateful for the Fetzer. So, anyway, the story goes like this. It was founded in 1968 by Barney Fetzer. He really was instrumental in a lot of different things, most notably this place called the Valley Oak Food and Wine Center, which is the first organic food and wine center in the country, which is really, really cool. So this is going on in the 80s. He's looking at things. with a different lens, just as organic is starting to become a thing. And it becomes this place for Julia Child and Alice Waters and Emma Lagasse to come up and start looking at what they're doing on the agricultural side, which I think is so interesting, and what I sort of hinted at earlier, because we're talking not just about wine today, we're talking about agriculture as a whole in California. And this is really what inspired Fetzer to start moving in a direction that incorporated organic farming and sustainable farming. So this Valley Oak Food and Wine Center started as this thing. It blew up. People got excited about it. You've got Julia Child going up to see all the tomatoes and all the produce. And then Barney was like, well, if it's good for the land, it's good for the grapes, right? So that's how it all started. And so Fetzer has really become this sort of symbol of sustainability in California. And I'm so excited because this is not a wine I would have expected, which I know is maybe not the right thing to say, but I think when we think of sustainability, as we've talked about throughout the past few weeks, sustainability, I think, is one of those things that we think automatically comes with a price tag. We think it's going to be extra money to get the extra things. And
Yeah.
the reality is
True.
we can have it at the price that we're shopping for wine. So we've got two wines, both are sub $10, 8 and 10. And then on top of that, so Fetzer has changed hands a few times, but they have still remained committed to sustainability. And especially for like their Bonterra brand, which is still being farmed organically. This is something of great, great importance, to the point where Fetzer was actually certified as a certified B Corp back in 2015. The entire company, so Vinga Concitoro, owns all of Fetzer and the affiliated brands. And as a company, they are now certified B Corp as well, which is really, really cool. So when you're talking about sustainability within corporations, that's what you're looking to move towards. But what you were alluding to earlier with the label redesign, so I think a lot of people were in the same boat. They didn't know that Fetzer was a winery or wine that was as committed to sustainability as they are. And so what they did was this whole package redesign to make it super easy to see on the back exactly what they're doing. So they've got everything on here. Obviously, it says they're certified B Corp, what they're doing on an energy stand. Thank you. Energy, water, waste. So certified zero waste, reducing water for 25%. So you get to see sort of in the same way that you might for other goods like cosmetics or food.
Yeah.
You walk into a Whole Foods and you can see on the back, like, this is what they're doing to support sustainability.
Yeah, these oats you're
And
buying or what have you, here it is right there on the wine label.
exactly. And so few wineries have done that on their label. And I love that Fetzer was just like, you know what, we're going to do a whole thing to make this really the forefront of what we're doing. So they moved the tasting notes down, they made them a little bit more playful, and they really put the sustainability efforts front and center. So two wines that we've got, I'm actually going to start with the dry ones, which is the Sauvignon Blanc, which I think is this one here. Yeah, this one. There we go, Sauvignon Blanc. So the 2009, you like that? 2019 Echo Ridge Sauvignon Blanc. This is a certified sustainable wine. In 2019, the winery is certified as well. So Sauvignon Blanc can go with a whole host of different cheeses. We love Sauvignon Blanc with cheese, especially with like goat cheeses, but they work incredibly well with cow's milk as well. So I don't know about you, but I think I could work this into the Mount Tam, but maybe the other one, this like sort of golden one here, might be a good fit for that.
The Mendoza. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And I do think, we talked about this a lot in the fall when we did our wine and cheese tasting, that, what goes together grows together. So you can even go back to like Old World and see how people are using, and, Sauvignon Blanc being in the Loire and goat cheese being such a big thing from that area. But I do think it's fun in California. We like to do things differently. So to find pairings that are a little bit different. This is a really interesting cheese. Okay. So this is actually called Mendoza. There's, as I was telling Amanda right before we got on the phone, it's Portuguese inspired. So there's a say D on there. So it's made by Bivalve Dairy, but it was sent to us by Cowgirl Creamery. So again, from that same area of California, again, cow's milk, and this is a semi-firm, right? And then we had a triple cream. Now we're moving on to a semi-firm. And I think what's so nice about this is that well, I don't know, Amanda, have you actually tried this cheese yet?
Have I tried the cheese? Yes. You're silly.
So I just really like how this has, like Amanda was saying, this has like a decent amount of acidity, like the triple cream has. and it has these like really fresh butter notes to it, but it also
Hmm.
is a tea that it's semi-firm. It's a little bit aged, so you're not getting quite the nuttiness you would get out of that maybe the next cheese we're going to talk about that's aged longer, but you're starting to get these kind of more complex notes. And
Hmm.
I like that Sauvignon Blanc kind of really brings out that brightness and the freshness that is in the cheese, right? Because it's not
Yes.
aged that much. There's a little bit of like, say, the classic like green apple or like citrus that you get out of Sauvignon Blanc, I think really elevates a cheese
Yes.
like this. So it's not the most classic and expected pairing, but I think it's a pairing that I think you should definitely think about. So even maybe it's like a young Gouda that you're talking about, or something along those lines. It's just something that can really just kind of get zinginess almost from a wine like
I
this.
like that. Yeah, and I love the Sauvignon Blanc is actually bringing out a lot of the florality of this cheese, which I don't think would
Yes.
exist without it. So if you're not someone that loves the nuttiness of this cheese, definitely go for something that has a little bit more fruit in the way of the Sauvignon Blanc or Riesling, as opposed to something like the Roederer Sparkling, which is going to bring out more of that nuttiness, more of that, more of that funkiness that was coming out of the triple cream. Now, alternatively, I love Riesling, as you know, and I
Yes.
love I love this Riesling because one, it's coming on under $10 and it's incredible quality. It
It's
does have a tiny bit
very,
of
very good for its price point. This is
it
like
is
a very
really
high
good.
value wine.
Yes. I opened this and I was like, this is delicious. Like I could be blinded on
Mhm.
this and be like, this is easily 25 to $30.
Yeah.
What I love is it smells like Riesling, number one. So you
Yep.
get a lot
Has
of
that
those
little
like
like
that lychee.
petrol-y. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Peachy petrol. It smells like the grape.
Yeah.
But I what I also love is that they actually left a little bit of residual sugar in this wine, and I like that because this is a lot of the vineyards that this wine is being sourced from are from Monterey, which can lend itself to brighter acidity. And so to me,
Yeah.
I think of this as like lemonade, right?
Yeah.
You want the citrus to show through, but you want a little bit of sweetness to sort of amplify all of the flavor. And so that's what I love about this Riesling is that you're getting a little bit of like amped up fruit in this wine, but you're still getting all of that freshness and all of that acidity, which makes this wine really, really delicious with something like this cheese here
Yeah.
because it's bringing out the florality and it's also giving you all the acidity to match it, but it's also sort of treating it like a little preserve. So if you're someone that likes the cheese with just like, a dash of like something fruit on the side, if you like it with a little bit of like a dried
Yeah.
apricot or some preserves, like I've got my nectarine preserves here from Frog's Leap. And I love that on top with like a cracker. That sort of like does the trick. So this is like an all-in-one pairing for me with the Riesling.
Definitely.
Mm.
And I think what's really nice about this style, I think in my experience at least, I find that semi-firm cheeses kind of get a little like tossed to the side when it comes to cheese plates. People go for fresh cheeses, they go for aged cheeses, they go for triple creams, they go for blues, but like the semi-firms are what I feel like don't get enough love. And what's
I
nice
agree.
about a semi-firm like this, it's not aged that long, you're gonna get like real grassy notes. And it's not this like
Mm.
fresh grass pasture that we were getting out of the triple cream. It's a grassiness that, again, to Amanda's point, like the florality of the Riesling just like totally brings to the forefront. And so this is just, I think, one of those examples of pairing where you're saying, okay, there's a completely different element coming out because of the wine I'm choosing to pair with this cheese. But yeah, so that is something that we think is like a really great spring style pairing because to
Hmm.
Amanda's point, you could bring out some fresh spring fruit. You could have one of the delicious preserves from all across the state. We have great preserves makers,
Yeah.
but
Well,
something like this with that kind of a wine, I think is something that just screams spring. Like if you're having a Mother's Day get together next week, I think that would be a really fun kind of unexpected way to do a cheese plate.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, I do want to bring up because I actually have the honey and the preserves. Frog's Leap is one of my favorites. They, do all the right things in the way of organic and sustainability, but they're not alone. There are a ton of wineries that we've talked about throughout the course of these past few weeks, as well as wineries that are certified sustainable that because they are doing all of these sustainable things and taking into consideration the entire environment. So a lot of the wineries will have beehives, they'll have, orchards and produce planted. So a lot of these wineries actually do have olive oils and preserves and honeys. So one of the ways that you can support those efforts is, of course, by buying those, those goods, those preserves, those honeys, and what have you. And I have to tell you, they're some of my favorite. Whenever I fly back home to Philadelphia, like this is what I bring back, especially for my family. That's like, what did you bring me? What did you bring? Like, this is the easiest thing for me to pick up,
Yeah.
and it's so delicious, and it doesn't taste like anything else that you can get from the East Coast. It really does truly
Yeah.
feel like California. So I support that
Yes.
endeavor, and I support eating honey raw as well. I should say.
Yes, and I will give like another little random shout out here, which is our friends at Frog Hollow, are kind of East Bay. They also have amazing preserves and will ship fresh fruit. So that's also
Mm,
something I think is like another. I'm just I clearly have Mother's Day on the mind, but like I think that's another great gift option is to give somebody a box of fresh California fruit, maybe send them a bottle of one of these wines. I know if I had that, maybe one of the cheeses, I would think you were the best child that ever graced the earth personally.
I
So
couldn't agree
I'm just going to throw
more.
that out there.
What a great
um,
idea. Wow, I feel like I know what I'm doing for Mother's Day now. This is great.
um, but okay, we're talking about sustainability on the state as a whole, and
Hmm.
one of the things I did want to point out while we were talking, and just to be clear, this is called the Mendonça cheese by Bivalve Dairy, but we are really referring to like any kind of semi-firm cheese would really work in this pairing that we're talking about. Any cow's milk, again, all cow's milk cheeses today. But another thing that I want you to keep in mind that some of these creameries are doing, over 40% of California dairies are using feed ingredients that are actually byproducts from other parts of the
Mm,
state. So, for example, the feed that the cows are getting might be old almond hulls, they might be tomato pulp. So, there's actually also this interconnectivity that's not just with us on the plate, but actually happening out in the environment where different farmers talking to each other to say, you have X waste, how can I use your must? How can I use this? And that's something else that the more that I've come to know agriculture here in California, I've been just amazed and amazed by the ingenuity that we're seeing with different farmers and different agriculture operations as they figure out, okay, it's not just up to me to figure out what my waste is, but how can I help my neighbor and their farm and their production reduce
mhm.
their waste too? And so that's one of these ways that we're seeing that interconnectivity happen.
It's so
Um,
true. The wineries are learning not only from each other, but they're also learning from these other industries. And there's, I mean, in Napa and Sonoma, I live in Napa Valley. To see, that sort of that camaraderie, them work together, to see where that inspiration is being drawn from is just, it's amazing. It really does feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I even think about just one more little dairy example is that I always think about when I first moved, I had been living abroad, realized that I always thought I was lactose intolerant, lived abroad, never had any lactose problems when I lived in Europe and moved back and moved to the Bay Area for the first time in my life and said, like, why am I not having lactose issues here either? And I realized it's because I was drinking Strauss family dairy farms, and they were, along with Clover and a lot of these other dairies we have here in California, pushing before anybody knew what problems were with like any kind of growth hormones or keeping their
Hmm.
fields clean or any of that. Like, I'm talking about the early 2000s. A lot of these dairies were already working toward things like we as consumers weren't aware of.
Hmm.
So this commitment really goes back quite a ways. And I think what's nice about it is, I don't know about you, Amanda, but I feel like I've learned a lot from a lot of these makers, these artisans, whether they're, winemakers, cheese,
Hmm.
creamery. They are sometimes saying, like we've seen over the course of this sustainability conversation, they're saying, hey, this thing over here is actually important and we're already doing it. And we want you to know about it, not just so you pat us on the back, but because you should know about it with every choice you make when it comes to food, wine, cheese, anything related to this industry. But anyway,
You
sorry for
hit
my
the nail on the head
diatribe.
though with with Strauss, because that was like, I think that this has been a revelation of mine since moving to California. And legitimately, when I was back home spending a little time with family, do you remember what I did? Did I tell you this?
No,
I
no.
When I was back home, I when I was in California and I knew that I'd sign back for a little bit, I was like, I can't be without Strauss butter. So I went to the grocery store and I got a ton of Strauss butter so that I could bring it back home with me and I didn't have to use other butter. Because I'm
Well,
so I'm like you, I'm so obsessed with the notion of California dairy, and it is like it's
yeah.
such a revelation. And then for it to be as delicious as it is, which also is
Yeah.
delicious, but then also to know that it's delicious because of X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
makes it all the better. So
Yeah,
I have a
it's
love affair
true.
with
It's
straws.
true. Well, speaking of love affairs, I have a love affair with this cheese that was sent to us that I didn't know about until it was sent to us,
Ooh,
which
a new discovery
is
of cheese. How exciting.
so. And I think we were saying that we feel like, can you see that I just took a big hunk out of it right here that I'm
I did
about
the
to
same
eat?
thing.
So this here is actually
Mm,
the Estero Gold by Valley Ford Creamery, and it's made to resemble almost like an Asiago or an Alpine cheese, right? So Asiago or Montasio, even kind of not quite Conte, but like even leaning in that direction. We're talking cheeses that go from young to old really well. This is
hmm
aged 18 months. So you're getting those delicious crystals that you get in an aged Gouda, that you get in an aged Parm. So any of those kind of cheeses that are aged like 18 up to, if you can find it, 24 months. These cheeses that have this kind of crystallization quality. And if you don't know what we're talking about, like stop what you're doing immediately after we finish talking, go to the store and get an aged cheese, either like I said, a Gouda, a Parm, or any of these ones that we have in California. Again, this being the Estero Gold. These have these crystallization that happens with the aging process of the cheese as it goes from being kind of more semi-firm to a proper hard cheese. This is a very hard, kind of crumbly cheese. And that to me, I don't know about you, Amanda, but on the culinary side, I always feel like this is culinary magic. And so it's like wine versatility. It is one of
Yes.
these cheeses that I'm just like, I could be, I mean, there's obviously wines doesn't go with, but I'm like, there's a lot of wines I could have with this cheese.
No, I think you're spot on. I think I took a bite of that and then I immediately went to the Riesling because I was like, oh, I didn't initially consider the Riesling as being a good pairing, but it actually works really well because this cheese is very, very salty and it
Yes.
loves the sweetness of this wine, but also it works really well because, as I mentioned, the Riesling has the acidity to stand up to this cheese because
Yeah.
it's a mouthful and it goes in, it cleans up after itself works. I think it's going to work with Sauvignon Blanc. We know it's going to work with a sparkling,
Mm-hmm.
but it also would work really well with a red wine. And I think one of the things we haven't
Yeah.
touched on today, but we've talked about before in other episodes, is obviously you've seen us have a lot of cheese with white wines and sparkling wines, but not a lot of red wine. And so the reason for that is because red wines typically are more challenging to pair and in a proper food and wine pairing fashion. So you can do whatever you want. If you're drinking red wine and cheese, I encourage it. But red wine is very difficult to pair with cheese because it generally lacks the acidity necessary to stand up to it. So when we think of acid, we think of it in the same way as sweetness. So sweet one's sweet, acid one's acid. So at least when it comes with our food. So red wines typically have moderate acidity, but when you've got something like you said with texture, crystallization, nuttiness, roundness, intensity, like there is enough to stand up to a red wine or a red wine to stand up to it. And I
Yeah.
love that this can actually pair with something like our last wine, which is going to be
Yes.
silver oak, which I know that but I wonder if you like really know silver oak in the way that
I
I've
mean,
grown to
I
love
think
it.
the wines of today, I know the Fets are the best because
Okay.
a little side story that I used to go to all like the slow food events in the Bay Area, and the
Mm,
Fetzer, that well, when it was still owned by the family, the Fetzer family was extremely involved in that. So I already knew that story, and I have been to Roederer. I just realized I don't think I've visited Silver Oak, but it's always
oh,
been like in our family. It's kind of like to me, it's this classic California cab that you're just like, it's kind of like we were talking about with the Dow the other week, where you're just
yep.
like, there's a certain place in time when you turn to Silver Oak. And I think this cheese might be one of them.
This cheese is definitely one of them, but I love that you haven't been there because I hope that I get to be the one to introduce you to one or both of
Okay,
their
great.
properties. So the wine that we have today is the 2016 Alexander Valley. So Silver Oak actually
Mhm.
has two properties, one in Oakville, one in Alexander Valley, but it is still family owned and operated. They are multi-generational and they have been called the most eco-conscious winery in California by the San Francisco Chronicle, which was I didn't know until I
Which is
was researching a little
incredible.
bit more. The wine or that? Yeah, both. Um, so what's
Both. You're
both?
like, check, check.
Check, check. So I like you know, before I moved to California, I was like, yeah, Silver Oak, like it's great, everybody loves it, easy. I have learned probably more about Silver Oak in the past 5 years, 6 years of me living in California than maybe any other winery because there is just so much to learn. They are such an incredible family and company, and what they have done for sustainability is mind blowing. I'm so excited that we sort of, I won't say we saved the best for last, but like they are going so above and beyond in so many ways. They have two platinum LEED certified wineries. Both Alexander Valley and Oakville are platinum LEED certified. The Alexander Valley one, which is the one we're drinking today, build from the ground up. I hope you and I go get to have an
Yes.
afternoon there and do their food and wine pairing tasting because they grow 90% of their produce on property at both properties, and they have a chef to prepare food at both. They've got a gorgeous kitchen that you would like just totally drool over. But beyond that, you walk around there and it's like it's solar everything. Everything is renewable from a water standpoint. They're a certified living building as of April 2020, which means they are creating not only a positive impact on humans, but they are. I'm just going to read it here because it's pretty amazing because I didn't know what it was. Um, Living buildings give more than they take, creating a positive impact on the human and natural systems that interact with them. And the winery is only the 26th building in the world to receive full accreditation. So, what they are doing on the winery side is pretty amazing, but also they are doing all the things that we've talked about in the past couple of weeks on sustainability. It is I can't I don't have enough time to tell you how much they're doing, but it pleases me so much that they are such a beloved brand because they deserve every sale, every credit, every love. There's so many people that love Silver Oak, but they deserve all of it because it is truly an amazing feat what they've accomplished, both in Alexander Valley and in Oakville. And one of the things I never considered that they pointed out to me because I did a little thing with them. We did a conversation. So I don't know if you know this, but Silver Oak famously uses exclusively American oak. They always have, and they have their own cooperage in Missouri. And one of the things they had said, they were like, well, American oak is actually more eco friendly. One because because of the type of oak and the renewable. I think the renewability of that and the way that it grows,
Yeah,
but also because they're only flying it from Missouri to California, not
sure.
France to
Goes to across
California.
the
So I was like,
Atlantic. Yeah.
oh, that's so true. Like way less of a carbon footprint, and you're managing all of what's happening at your own cooperage. So a delicious wine, an amazing family, just D all of the above. I'm always so impressed by
Yeah.
what they do and I always learn something. So and their food's delicious. They do such a great job with their food and wine pairing.
Well, and I think, Amanda, this is just proof that what we've talked about quite a bit, which is we're trying to not just introduce you to some wines. Like I don't know, maybe you didn't know about Ling Twins or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps Bara, right? I know
Bara.
some of
Mm-hmm.
these other parts of the state that aren't just the classic wine areas. When people are from outside of California, they might not know those wineries. But you most likely know every single one of the wines we talked about today. You probably know all the wines we talked about last week. And what the point of us bringing them to your attention is that there are already wines you probably have on your wine rack, in your cellar, in your wine fridge that are sustainable because so many wines are sustainable in California. So we're just asking you to be conscious of that so that
Yeah.
you can vote with your dollars and so that you can start kind of demanding that if that's something that interests you, as we all start going back to restaurants, as we start traveling and going through tastings or going to wine shops more and more, really just talking about this in, with excitement, because
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, as I've said, I'm a chef first and foremost. So I came to all this conversation through going to farmers markets and meeting farmers. And it really makes me feel just really empowered to say, okay, I already know this about the dairy. I already know this about what's happening with, fruits and nuts growing in the States. So how can I expand my knowledge over into wine so that I'm just like that much more, empowered as I go out as a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we should talk about these last couple pairings, which is we have the Silver Oak, we have their cab, and I would say it goes absolutely fabulous with these kind of hard cheeses that have that crystallization we are talking about. But we would be remiss not to bring up a good quality, fabulous blue. And if there's a blue that California is known for, they're quite an incredible award-winning blues here in California. But I would argue that this one from Point Reyes is probably the most known outside of California.
Yep.
I really enjoy it because it reminds me a lot of a Gorgonzola Dolce in the sense that it's extremely pungent in its blueness, but it has quite a bit of sweetness helping balance and creaminess, helping to balance out the acidity and the saltiness. So it's not a kind of blue like a Stilton or something like that, right? It's going to have a little bit more.
Right?
Yeah, it's not going to have almost like tannins. I mean, it has a little bit of tannin, but it's not going to have the same amount of tannin that you're going to get. So I always think about the fact that, again, grows together, not to keep referencing Old World, but in the Old World, you would see a Gorgonzola Dolce most likely paired with a bigger red, even maybe something, even all the way over to like a Barolo or something like that. But my point is that if you are thinking, even in France, you see a Roquefort paired a lot of times with a Cab or something that's more classic, Merlot or something. And I think just reminding yourself that sometimes if you're seeing it in other parts of the world, it's probably going to work also in California. But again, this is distinctly California because this cheese in particular, again, all these are cow's milk. All these are from the Sonoma Marin areas. If you haven't been there, we've talked about this with the wines, but the wines from Sonoma Coast are going to have a lot of salinity in them. Well, also the cheeses that are coming from this part of the state are going to have more salinity than you're going to see from cheeses like, say, from our friends at Fiscalini that come from more in the Central Valley. And so just reminding yourself that also taking into account the terroir doesn't just apply to the wines, it also applies to the cheese. Because these cows are snacking on delicious pastured grass right next to the Pacific Ocean, there is a bit of salinity in this cheese that you might not otherwise see. And so I really enjoy pairing these two together. I think this is might be, I don't know if I have a favorite pairing today, but this is definitely tied for favorite pairing.
This is definitely one of them. Although I will say, I don't know if you picked up the Riesling to pair with this. It actually works really well. In the same way that we did like the Dolce. I think we had the Point Reyes before. We did that with the Dolce. This works really well.
We did.
I think again, like with a little bit of like sweetness and acidity, but
yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about red wine, like I said, red wines are more challenging to pair, especially when we're talking about ones like Cabernet that have more body, more tannin, more structure. But one of the reasons that I love the Silver Oak Alexander Valley is that, Alexander Valley is, a warmer part of Sonoma, but it's also a little bit cooler than somewhere like Oakville, although they are getting Silver Oak, Oakville gets, their fruit from quite a few places. But I always find that this wine, the Alexander Valley, has a bit more of that like savory touch to it. It has a bit more brightness. It has a bit more lift. It doesn't always feel as like dense as the Oakville Silver Oak. I say that 10 times fast. So I love that because there is like a softness to that. When we're thinking about pairing red wines with cheeses, generally it's the lighter, softer, less bodied ones that work.
Yeah, you're thinking like a Beaujolais or something.
Exactly. Like a Grenache or even like a lighter bodied Zinfandel. But this works incredibly well. And like you said, I mean, this is such a special blue, although there's so many great blue cheeses that are made in California, but I think you're right. Like this one sort of takes the cake because it has that creaminess, it has the funkiness, and it's definitely blue, but it doesn't pucker your mouth out, and it leaves it, refreshed already, ready and primed for a little red wine.
I mean, I do think since we've talked Mother's Day, it's only fair we also talk Father's Day. So if you're looking for a Father's Day idea, I think there might not be something better than getting some California pasture raised beef, throwing it on the grill, putting a little bit of a California blue cheese on top, maybe in a little classic, mixed in some of that delicious California butter, letting that melt, serving some of the Silver Oak, and you basically have knocked it out of the park with one of the most classic Dad's Day.
You're killing me.
Menus, right? So these are also things these are not just pairings that we're talking about for today. We're talking about pairings that are going to take you all the way through spring and summer. In terms of wine and cheese. But that was a lot of information. So we should just remind you that in terms of when you have a wine on hand and you don't know what its status is, probably the easiest thing for you to do is to go to CaliforniaSustainableWine.com, and you can use that search method that Amanda showed you last week.
Yep.
And then if you're looking for a California cheese and you want to know it's for sure made in California, to look for that real California milk seal that you see at the bottom of this
Yep.
one. And then for all those other logos and everything else that we've been talking about over the past couple weeks, I mean, Amanda, do you want to just give us a quick recap of kind of the top things we should keep in mind as we go forward in our sustainability adventures?
Yes. Let's talk about where you can find them. So, like you said, you can find them on discovercaliforniawines.com, but you can also look for the label on the back. But things that you can ask about if you are in the vineyards or in the wineries, ask if they are, farming using, ask if they're using compost, ask if they are donating or being philanthropic in their own communities. Ask if there's solar powered things happening in the winery. Ask if they're being conscious about their water use. Ask about whether or not they're being mindful of their topsoil. So those are all
Yeah.
some questions that you can ask. And as Aida pointed out earlier, I mean, we're all so lucky to be living in an era of information where you can not only look for this on the internet, but you can have like full conversations with a lot of the winemakers directly through the DMs on Instagram and Facebook, or Twitter, wherever. So it's really, we're so empowered to be able to do these things now, and I'm so excited that California has really led the charge, not only in the United States but in the world. And I'm so delighted that we got a chance to talk about California wines in this way. We're really putting sustainability first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, remember that it's not totally the end of April yet, and there are a few more events going on. So if you want to
Yeah.
join a virtual wine tasting, or if you're fortunate enough to live in one of California's numerous wine growing regions, there are hikes and, nature adventures and tastings happening at some of the wineries right now, depending on the exact location. So you can look all that up as well over on discovercaliforniawines.com. But I think the big thing for me is Amanda and I have tried to learn a lot. We've tried to share with you all a lot of what we've learned, but just reminding ourselves that this is something we need to continue learning. This is something that doesn't just stop tomorrow. That if we all continue to ask about this, to learn about this, then we will be celebrating Down to Earth Month, not just its 10th anniversary, but its 20th, its 30th, and hopefully have even more incredible stats to talk about waste reduction and, the community efforts and all the things. I feel like we're at the beginning of a really, silver lining story here, when there's so much that you can get bummed out about when it comes to the environment. What's happening in the wine industry here in California is very heartening. So we encourage you to support it, not just because we're here on the California Wines Facebook page, but because as people who live in this state, we really, truly want to support these businesses who are doing right by us.
Absolutely. You summed it up perfectly. And I think on that note, we will direct you to discovercaliforniawines.com for more information. And thank you for your time. As always, if you've got
Yeah.
questions, throw them in the comments, shoot us a DM on Instagram. We're happy to continue this conversation well beyond the month of April and into whatever lies ahead. So cheers, Aida. I'll pick up my sparkling because that always feels so festive.
Of
You can pick up
course.
whatever you want
Yes.
though. But cheers to you, and I hope to drink more sustainable wines with you. Hopefully, maybe at Silver Oak. We'll see.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll see you
All right.
there. Bye,
All
everybody.
right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.